Berkshire's claim to Britain's oldest town quietly collapsed. For years, the Guinness Book of Records listed a Berkshire settlement as the oldest continuously inhabited place in the country. But newer archaeology moved the title elsewhere. That town is just one of 9 across the county, old enough to have a Saxon abbey, a Domesday book entry, or a castle William the Conqueror started in 1070. Berkshire has a reputation as one of the most expensive counties in England, yet a few of these 9 still sell for under £400,000. We're going through all 9, from the priciest Thames side villages to the towns still within a pension's reach, ending with the one that started this whole debate. Subscribe if you're tired of property videos where everything looks perfect, because here we show Britain's towns with real numbers and the honest catch on everyone. Here's the debate underneath this whole list. Oldest can mean 3 different things, and they rarely point to the same town. It can mean the earliest archaeology in the ground, a Mesolithic camp or a Roman road. It can mean the earliest written record, usually the Domesday book from 1086. Or it can mean the longest unbroken stretch of people actually living somewhere, which is the hardest of the 3 to prove. Local museums and family history societies love to repeat these claims, and most of the time they're grounded in genuine digs and genuine documents. But every town and every local tourist board with a stake in the story has an incentive to call itself the oldest, the first, or the original. That doesn't make the claims false, it just means we'll name the source behind every one of them, instead of treating a plaque outside a church as proof on its own. There's a boundary problem worth clearing up too before we start. Abingdon is often named as Britain's actual oldest continuously settled town, based on Iron Age and Roman remains under its modern town centre, and for centuries it served as the historic county town of Berkshire. Today it sits inside Oxfordshire, so it doesn't get a numbered spot on this list. This list sticks to 9 towns still inside modern Berkshire: Pangbourne, Maidenhead, Cookham, Wargrave, Windsor, Reading, Hungerford, Newbury and Thatcham. Every one of them gets 3 things, and only 3 things: a real age claim backed by a source, a real current house price, because that's the number this audience actually cares about, and one honest catch, because nowhere on this list is flawless, and pretending otherwise would waste your time. One of these 9 used to hold the biggest title in British archaeology and lost it. We'll get to why at the very end. For now, let's start at the cheaper, quieter end of the list and work toward the town that made this whole debate necessary in the first place. Number 9, Pangbourne. This Thames-side village doesn't lean on Roman roads or Saxon charters for its fame. It leans on a book and a stretch of river that still looks like a postcard. Kenneth Grahame wrote The Wind in the Willows while living nearby, and Pangbourne has traded on that gentle riverside reputation ever since, right down to Pangbourne College sitting on the hill above the water. Here's the number that matters for this list. The average sold price in Pangbourne sits somewhere between £487,500 and £575,000, depending on which source you check. And prices have actually fallen here recently, which almost never happens in this part of the Thames Valley. Compared with 2023, when a typical sale went for around £2,345, that's a drop of close to 20% over the last year alone. Go back further and it gets more interesting. In 2016, homes here averaged £515,817, which means today's price sits only slightly below where it was a decade ago, even after the recent fall. In other words, this isn't a village in long-term decline, it's a village having one unusually soft year, which is a very different story for anyone timing a move. Now, the honest part, Pangbourne Parish still ranks as the 24th most expensive parish in West Berkshire, even after that drop A falling price doesn't mean a cheap price. It means an expensive village having a rough couple of years, which is a very different thing if you're the one actually buying rather than just watching the numbers move. Still, if you've been priced out of the Thames villages further downstream, a real 20% drop is a number worth watching closely. From a village riding out a price dip, we moved to a town that grew rich off a single bridge. Number 8, Maidenhead. Before it was Maidenhead, this stretch of the Thames was a small Anglo-Saxon settlement called South Ellington, and it shows up in the Domesday book under that name. In the hundred of Bainhurst, one of the old administrative districts, the Domesday surveyors used to group manors together. The new name, Maidenhead, meaning new wharf or landing place, first turns up in the Braycourt manorial rolls in 1296, and it stuck. The real turning point came around 1280, when a wooden bridge replaced the old ferry crossing and pulled the Great West Road, the main route to Reading, Gloucester and Bristol, straight through the town. A new wharf went up beside it to replace the old Saxon landing, and the town grew as a linear settlement along the newly diverted road, complete with hostelries, a guild hall, and a chapel built in the middle of the street itself. River trade followed the bridge, and by the middle of the 1700s, Maidenhead was one of the busiest coaching towns in the country, with more than 90 coaches passing through in a single day. Prices today still reflect that position on the map, right on the main route out of London. The median sale price at the end of the first half of 2026 sat around £506,900, while the 12-month average on some sites runs closer to £586,547. The wider Windsor and Maidenhead borough average sits near £565,000, and detached homes alone run past £800,000. The catch is simple. The price to earnings ratio in this borough works out to roughly 11 times the average local salary. And that's not a number a pension closes on its own, no matter how good the transport links look on paper. From a working river crossing built to move coaches and cargo, we moved to a village so beautiful one painter called it heaven. Number 7, Cookham. People were living here well before the Romans ever arrived. Archaeologists have pulled Bronze Age palstave axes out of the ground nearby, along with Roman coins from the reign of Emperor Caracalla. Evidence found near Holy Trinity Church points to an Anglo-Saxon monastic settlement on the same site, centuries before the Normans turned up. The church itself has Norman origins, and one inn in the village dates from the 1400s, making it one of the oldest still pouring pints in England. That's 4 separate layers of history stacked on the same small patch of riverbank. Bronze Age tools, Roman coins, a Saxon monastery, and a medieval church, all within walking distance of each other. Cookham's real fame, though, comes down to one man. Sir Stanley Spencer was born here in 1891, and he spent much of his life painting the village as a kind of visionary holy land. Biblical scenes played out through his own neighbours against the backdrop of the Thames and the churchyard he grew up beside. He called Cookham a village in heaven, and he meant it literally enough to paint the last judgment happening on the riverbank. The Stanley Spencer Gallery, housed in the village's old Wesleyan chapel, still tells that story today, right in the middle of the village he never really left. Now the honest part, and this one's blunt, there isn't a single reliable average house price for Cookham right now. And that absence tells you something on its own about who's actually buying here. What you do find instead are individual listings. A 17th century cottage that once served as Spencer's studio at a guide price of £925,000, and a graceful riverside house connected to his world going for £4.5 million. This is a look-at-it village, not a budget one, and no amount of history changes that math. If you came to this list hoping every entry would fit a pension, Cookham is the honest reminder that some of Berkshire's oldest towns simply priced themselves out of that conversation a long time ago. The Bronze Age toolmakers and the Anglo-Saxon monks who first settled this stretch of riverbank never priced in an artist making it famous 900 years later. From a village an artist called Heaven, we head to a village whose Domesday-era wealth still shows up on the price tag today. Number 6, Wargrave. The name comes from the Saxon word Wargrave, and the evidence points to people living here continuously since Saxon times. The village sat right at the edge of what was once Windsor Forest, a position that gave it both a defensible spot and access to valuable timber. The Domesday book entry from 1086 is where this town really earns its place on the list. Wargrave sat in the 100 of Charlton with 61 households recorded, putting it in the top 20% of settlements by size anywhere in the country at the time. The manor worked 29 ploughlands with 25 plough teams, kept 16 acres of meadow for hay, and held woodland big enough to support 100 pigs. It also ran 3 fisheries, likely weirs or eel traps, that controlled river traffic and brought in real income on top of the farming. This wasn't a sleepy hamlet tucked away from everything. It was one of the wealthier places in the whole of Berkshire almost 1,000 years ago, and the record proves it in detail rather than in local legend. And it still is wealthy today, just in a different currency. The average price in Wargrave now sits around £1.1 million, up 24% over the past year, and 23% since 2023, which makes it the single most expensive town on this entire list by a wide margin. For comparison, that's still cheaper than neighbouring Shiplake, but well above nearby Hare Hatch, so even inside this one stretch of the Thames Valley, Wargrave sits firmly on the pricier side. Set it against the £488,000 average across Berkshire as a whole, and Wargrave is running at more than double the county figure. The catch here is plain: whatever Wargrave was worth in 1086, it's worth more than most pensions can carry in 2026. Those 3 fisheries, recorded nearly 1,000 years ago, were controlling river traffic and generating income on top of the farming. And that same instinct for turning river frontage into money never really left the village. It's proof that a genuinely old, genuinely prosperous town tends to stay prosperous across nearly 1,000 years, which makes for good history and bad news for anyone hoping to retire here on a fixed income. If you've made it this far, consider hitting like and subscribing before we carry on. Now, the town most people watching this have already heard of, whether they know its history or not. Number 5, Windsor. There was already a Saxon royal residence here by around the 9th century at what's now called Old Windsor, a couple of miles from where the castle stands today. William the Conqueror chose a new site on a chalk bluff rising about 100 feet above the river and started building Windsor Castle around 1070, finishing roughly 16 years later. The location wasn't chosen at random. Windsor sat inside a ring of motte and bailey castles William built around London, each one about a day's march, roughly 20 miles, from the city and from the next castle in the ring, so reinforcements could move quickly if trouble started. The first castle here was timber, a keep on top of a man-made mound protected by a small bailey wall, and it grew from there into the stone fortress standing today. Since the reign of Henry I, starting in 1100, the castle has stayed in continuous royal use, which makes it the longest occupied palace anywhere in Europe. That's not a local legend or a line from a tourist leaflet. That's close to 1,000 years of one building staying in the same job, through fires, sieges, and every English monarch since. Now, the number that matters for anyone actually thinking about living here. The provisional average house price across the Windsor and Maidenhead borough was around £565,000 in April 2026, already 15% above the £488,000 average for Berkshire as a whole. Windsor itself has run anywhere from £598,392 to £689,938, depending on the source and the time window. Even first-time buyers in the area paid an average of £422,000, and that tells you the entry price alone rules out a lot of pensions before you even look at a full family home. Now, the honest part, this is the most famous name on the whole list, and it comes with the price tag to match. You're not buying a quiet retirement here, so much as buying proximity to a working royal palace, tourists, traffic and all. Old Windsor, the original Saxon settlement a couple of miles upriver, never got the castle, and it never got the crowds either. The fame and the price both trace back to William's decision to build on that particular chalk bluff, not to anything Old Windsor itself did wrong. If that's worth it to you, Windsor delivers history nowhere else on this list can match. If it isn't, keep going, because the next few towns swing back toward affordable. From the castle town, we move to the town that actually built the county's biggest city. Number 4, Reading. Saxon settlers moving up the Thames and the Kennet founded Reading around the 6th century, looking for a place to put down roots along 2 rivers instead of just one. Reading Minster, the Church of St. Mary the Virgin, is the town's oldest church site, and tradition credits St. Birinus with building a small chapel there, back in the 600s. The bigger royal story came later. In 979, Queen Ælfrith founded a royal nunnery on that same site, and she did it, according to the record, as an act of repentance after the murder of her stepson, King Edward the Martyr. That single act of guilt turned a Saxon river crossing into a genuine religious centre. By 1525, Reading had grown into the largest town in Berkshire, and the 10th largest in the whole of England, measured by taxable wealth, and it never really stopped growing after that. A river crossing that started as a modest Saxon settlement ended up outranking almost every other town in the country within 5 centuries, which is a faster rise than almost anywhere else on this list. Prices today put Reading near the friendly end of this list. Depending on the source and the time window, the average sits somewhere between £345,000 and £403,549, comfortably under the £488,000 average for Berkshire as a county. That gap between Reading's price and the county average is one of the widest on this entire list, which is unusual for a place with this much documented history behind it. The catch is straightforward. Reading is a genuine city now, with a built-up area population past 200,000. So if you came here dreaming of a quiet village green, this isn't that town, and it never will be again. What you get instead is one of the cheapest average prices on this whole list, attached to a place with 1,300 years of continuous history behind it. From the county's biggest, busiest old town, we go to one so old it isn't even in the record that's supposed to prove it. Number 3, Hungerford. This market town sits 8 miles west of Newbury and around 60 miles west of London. The ground underneath it has produced evidence of Stone Age and Bronze Age occupation, a Roman field system on the common, and a Roman road running just to the north on its way toward Bath. The medieval story starts with Robert de Beaumont, the first Earl of Leicester, who was granted the land and held it until his death in 1118. His son inherited the estate and spent the next 70 years actively encouraging the town's growth, and by 1241, Hungerford was calling itself a borough in its own right, with the rights and status that came with that word. That's more than a century of one family deliberately building a market town out of what had been Roman farmland, brick by brick and charter by charter. Here's what surprised me about this town. Despite all of that genuine age, Hungerford itself doesn't appear by name in the Domesday Book of 1086. It fell under 4 separate ancient manors and the royal manor of Kintbury instead, sitting at the extreme western edge of that manor's land. A reminder that missing from Domesday doesn't mean missing from history. Prices here run tighter than most of this list, clustering somewhere between £378,841 and £419,303, depending on the source you check, which is a narrow, reassuring range compared to some of the other towns on this list. That puts Hungerford in the same affordable bracket as Newbury and Thatcham further along this countdown, all three sitting comfortably below the Berkshire County average. Now the honest part, Hungerford sits right at the western edge of Berkshire, about 60 miles out from London, so this isn't a town for anyone who needs to stay close to the capital for family or hospital appointments. What you get in return is a real market town with genuine Stone Age roots and a price that actually fits a pension. From a town missing from the Domesday book, we move to one recorded there in exact surviving detail. Number 2, Newbury. This one shows up in the Domesday Book of 1086 in black and white, sitting in the 100 of Thatcham with 22 households recorded, putting it in the top 40% of settlements by size at the time. The lord was Arnulf of Hesdin, and the manor ran 2 mills valued at £2.10, worth £24 a year to him overall. Numbers that sound small today but marked Newbury as a working, productive place even then. Those 2 mills would have been grinding corn for the whole surrounding 100, which is exactly the kind of unglamorous, practical detail that tells you a place was actually functioning, not just sitting on the map. Fast forward almost 1,000 years and Newbury sits comfortably among the more affordable towns on this list. The 12-month average on Rightmove runs around £395,340. A separate aggregator puts the median sale price closer to £370,000 across 557 sales in the past year, and another source has it near £393,000, down 15.3% year on year, which is one of the steeper recent falls on this whole list. Set against the £488,000 average across Berkshire as a whole, Newbury is sitting close to £100,000 below the county figure, right alongside Reading at the affordable end of this countdown. The catch cuts both ways. Falling prices are good news if you're the one buying in Newbury right now, and less good news if you're selling a home somewhere else in Berkshire to fund the move. A soft market rarely stays soft in just one direction, and you'll feel it on both ends of the same transaction. Pangbourne, further back on this list, is going through a similar double-digit fall. So Newbury isn't an isolated case, it's part of a wider pattern across this county right now. Even so, this is one of the most affordable old market towns left in the county, mills, Domesday entry and all. And that brings us to the town that started this whole debate. Number 1, Thatcham. This is the town that started the debate at the very beginning of this list. In 1990, the Guinness Book of Records listed Thatcham as Britain's oldest continuously inhabited settlement. And the claim wasn't invented out of nowhere. Archaeologists found a Mesolithic hunting camp near Lower Way, dated to somewhere between 10,000 BC and 8,000 BC, and further digs in 1956 and 1989 confirmed that different groups of Mesolithic people had settled the same ground over and over across thousands of years. Roman-era remains along Bath Road add a metalworking settlement to that same stretch of land, evidence of recycled metal and roadside industry, so this isn't a thin claim built on one lucky find in a single field. Here is the reveal we promised at the start of this list. By 2014, West Berkshire Museum itself was talking about that oldest title in the past tense, rather than defending it the way it once did in 1990. Newer research pulled the national spotlight away from Thatcham over the last few decades. Dig dates from Amesbury in Wiltshire now push back as far as 8,820 BC. An Iron Age enclosure turned up under Abingdon, and Colchester makes its own claim as Britain's oldest recorded town based on surviving Roman documents. None of those rival claims sit in Berkshire, which is exactly why the title moving on does not erase what was actually dug up here. The Mesolithic camp, the repeated Roman-era settlement, and the two separate confirming digs are still real finds in real Berkshire soil. Whatever a National Record Board decides to call the winner this year. The record did not get disproven so much as overtaken by better evidence elsewhere, which is exactly the nuance this list opened with. Oldest depends entirely on which kind of proof you trust: archaeology, documents, or unbroken habitation. And different towns win depending on which one you pick. Now, for the number that actually matters if you are thinking about moving here, rather than just visiting. The average sold price in Thatcham runs somewhere between £370,000 and £400,000, with detached homes running well above that and terraced homes coming in lower still. Now the honest part, and for once it is a good one. Even the strongest historic claim on this entire list comes with an asterisk attached to it now. But the town holding that asterisk is also one of the most affordable places on the whole list. It has real Mesolithic roots stretching back 10,000 years, a genuine Roman settlement layered on top of them, and a price that still fits a pension today. That is the payoff this whole list was built around from the very first sentence. So there it is, 9 towns, prices from under £370,000 in Thatcham to over £1 million in Wargrave. And the town with the strongest claim to being the oldest turned out to be one of the cheapest, not the priciest. Tell me in the comments which one of these 9 you would actually pack a van for, and which one surprised you most.